Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back. Hope everybody had a good break. Our next speaker will be Sue Wyman, and Sue is the owner of Gunnison Gardens, where she utilizes the natural farming methods that conserve and enhance soil to grow a wide variety of vegetables, cold harvest fruits, and raise chickens. Gunnison Gardens is committed to growing and providing nutritious food for the Gunnison Valley as food security shifts with climate change and energy needs. I'll hand it off to Sue, and Sue, if you have anything else to add about yourself before you dive in, please do. Thank you.
All right. Well, I should add that I'm a hydrologist and civil engineer as well. So I thought the water conference was pretty interesting and pretty important. And I'm not doing a lot of hydrology as a consultant right now because farming is much more gratifying given the changes that we're seeing in society and culture and, you know, COVID-19 and the stresses on the earth. And there's just so many reasons that I feel called to do farming. So, but it takes everything. It takes all of my science background. It takes a lot of physical work and just thinking all the time, which is why it's a lot of fun. I need to share my screen, and hopefully that will work for everybody because I did put a few slides together. So I'm trying to do that right now, and let's see if this works. Can people see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I just put together a few slides to kind of keep me on track. You know, the topic of climate change and agriculture and water use is pretty big. But I just wanted to touch on a few things that seemed pertinent to my view of farming in Colorado and the type of farming that we're trying to do at Gunnison Gardens. And hopefully I can scroll through. But my screen doesn't want to change, so I might have to do something different. My shared screen is stuck. No, tell you what, I'm going to unshare that screen and try to share a different screen. That's
great, Sue. Sorry about that.
Oh, hey, you know, it's me. It's the technology. I'm fighting with it, but that's okay. How about that Zoom, huh? At least we can do this. How's that? Can people see my new screen? No. No.
It looks like we're seeing agriculture uses 89% of water consumed in Colorado.
Perfect. Well, you guys can see it, and I can't. I'm seeing something kind of different, but yes. So one of the big things that I spent about 15 years living and working in Metro Denver when I was working as a consultant, and we were always trying to be really careful with our toothbrushing and all of our individual water use, because there's no doubt that the metro areas have a real problem with water consumption or overconsumption and lawn watering and all of that. When you really look at the numbers, 89% of the consumptive use of water in Colorado is for agriculture. And a smaller percentage of that, of course, is municipal and industrial, and then what they call self-supplied industrial. And then the changes that we're seeing due to climate change and water use for agriculture are, we have significantly less snowpack on average in any given year. And there are some areas where the April snowpack is greater than 80% less than it was in 2017, or excuse me, changes from 1955 to 2015 are up to 80% less. That means that there's less snow water storage. And most of the water used for agriculture in Colorado is, well, of course, it's during the growing season. So we farmers need water in April, May, June, July, all the way through the end of the growing season, which for some areas can extend into October and November. And so if we have less snow water storage, the reservoirs fill up earlier, but there's less in-stream flow that's available. And at the same time that we have this increasing temperature, then the plants in the soil require more water. There's more evapotranspiration that's occurring. And couple that with the fact that there's been a USGS documented a 20% decrease in flow in the Colorado River just from 1913 to 2017. So basically, yeah, we've got less water overall. So there's a lot of effort that's been expended on trying to help farmers and ranchers conserve water. But a paper that came out, a study that came out just in February of 2020, showed that Colorado's farm water use exceeds the national average despite efforts to conserve. Well, that's a little bit misleading if you look at it, because yes, significant effort has been expended on the part of farmers and ranchers and NRCS and the state of Colorado. A lot of wise minds are looking at how can we help farmers use less water. And if you compare all of the states in the Colorado River Basin, Colorado's actually, our farm water use is actually less than Arizona, California, New Mexico, Utah, and others, and significantly less than Nevada. And a lot of these states do produce a lot of food. Arizona provides almost all of the winter lettuce for the entire country, and so on. Colorado comes in at 1.6 acre feet per acre, just behind Wyoming at 1.5 acre feet per acre. And if you ask me, Wyoming is just all wind and grass and cows. So we got a lot more going on. And I think 1.6 acre feet is not excessive, but we could certainly do better with some practices that are slowly being adopted. So here's a chart that talks a little bit about farm water use nationwide. So here's a little chart, and overall in the US, farms have been able to decrease the amount of water needed for agriculture. But in Colorado, it's kind of stayed the same. And in fact, in 2013, that 5-year period, it actually really jumped up. And that was, of course, due to droughts and so on. But the important thing to look at is how are farmers irrigating in Colorado, farms and ranches. Gravity, which is just like the ditches and the flood irrigation that you see, is 35% of the water use in the state. And overhead sprinklers, 55% of farms or farmland is irrigated that way. And then drip irrigation, particularly point drip or buried drip tape, is only 10%, because it's much more expensive to use that form of irrigation, even though it does conserve water. And then we have to ask, well, could Colorado go to all drip? No, probably not. Cattle and calves account for 60% of the revenue of agriculture in Colorado. And as Bill pointed out, there are huge ways that ranching and cattle use can, huge ways that they can improve on their water usage. But flood irrigation is, it's still in use for a lot of pastures, and maybe more just looking at the water use instead of the soil health, and that emphasis on soil health could help. But dairy products and corn and wheat and those uses, it's really difficult to put in extreme conservation measures. But there are things that can be done, and I'll talk about those. But again, the wheat and the hay and the corn and things like that, they're not going to be conducive to drip irrigation. But if we look at, so let me just sort of take it then to the micro level, the perspective of my farm, because I have a 4-acre farm in Gunnison producing relatively high dollar crops, at least compared to revenue per acre. If you're growing corn, wheat, or soybeans, you need big acreage, and you're going to get a relatively low revenue per acre. Market gardening, which is what I do, is intensive agriculture, where I have a smaller plot of land that I can manage intensely, pay attention to the soil health, and maximize yields from a smaller plot of land. So this is a slide of my farm, probably taken in June of maybe 2018. And again, we grow at least 40 different crops, a lot of brassicas and onions and potatoes, and anything cold hardy that will grow in Gunnison will grow. And I have an advantage in terms of being able to improve on my water use, because again, here are some of the higher dollar crops that I grow. I can sell directly to customers at our local farmers market, and I can get $6 a pound for my spinach, whereas big agriculture has a lot of middlemen along the way, and those producers are lucky if they're getting 25 cents a pound for their spinach. So I can at least afford to try to do it right and try to improve my soil and maximize my yields. Because again, I'm selling directly to the customer. So some of the methods at our farm, and even, it's a lot of it is scalable at any scale, that we use to conserve water on our farm. We use minimal or no tillage because tillage just disturbs the soil, and you lose moisture every time you till, as well as destroying your soil microbiome and really destroying your soil health. We use cover cropping with a variety of species, and I'll talk more in a subsequent slide about moisture monitoring. We do some of that on our farm. There's high-tech and low-tech versions. We use drip irrigation to help conserve water, and mulching, and then anything we do to increase carbon in the soil will increase soil moisture retention. And that's going to be the crux of having productive agriculture during the change in climate. So a little bit about moisture monitoring and targeted irrigation. It's so funny. I will get advertisements in the mail and in my email inbox with incredibly high-tech moisture monitoring equipment that they're trying to sell to me. If I had a larger farm, I would certainly invest in that. You can get moisture sensors that you can place all over your field that will feed into the GPS on your tractor and tell you, where to, how to set up your irrigation and things like that, and can also be tied in directly to your irrigation system. But I got to tell you, moisture monitoring can be as simple as this little device, just a little pocket probe, or your finger. You can stick your finger in the soil and see whether it's wet or dry. And if your soil is already wet, don't add more water. I think that anyone with a lawn or garden at home should be considering that as well, because we're all in it together. We all want to do whatever we can to conserve water for our state. It is a precious resource. So monitoring moisture, we use these pocket probes quite a bit. We use our finger quite a bit to see whether our crops need water. And I do have some nested tensiometers that are measuring moisture in the soil. And this example isn't from my farm, this little device, but there are some buried tensiometers, and they feed into this little data logger, which relays through the antenna, back to a base station, so you can track it there. We've got a couple of these set up, but we walk up with a laptop and monitor them. And so, you can get as high-tech or as low-tech, but the whole point is doing what farmers have been doing for eons, and that is watching your crops, watching your soil, listening, and not just hitting the easy button and saying, I'm going to apply 2 inches per week. And so other practices that we use buried drip tape. This is an example of a tractor with an implement attachment that'll bury your drip tape for you between your rows of crop. We don't work our beds with our tractor, and we don't have that implement, so we just set ours by hand. It takes about an hour to prep a bed and set the drip tape, and it's well worth it because we save so much more water by having our drip tape buried. That means we have less evaporation from the surface. The water's applied right into the root zone where our crops need it. We're not watering our aisles. We'll mulch our aisles, but we won't water them, so we're not wasting water on areas that we don't have growing crops. And then the other trick about the drip tape, there's all different types of it. We actually use Aquatrax, and you decide what PSI your flow system has, the spacing of your emitters, and they're really high tech. I mean, they have a little, these emitters look like a little slit, but they're engineered on the inside to have some tortuosity, so they're kind of self-cleaning. And as long as you put them with the emitters up, they will not clog. Well, they'll somewhat chemically clog, and then you can treat them with acid at the end of the season and things like that. The other thing is this drip tape is a petroleum hydrocarbon product. So make no mistake, all kinds of agriculture have a footprint. We try to bury our drip tape, clean it at the end of the season, repair any holes, and make it last as long as possible. There are some farms that will set fresh drip tape every year and pull it up and then landfill it. There aren't a lot of places to recycle it, so that might be a higher footprint that a bigger agricultural operation is forced to use that we luckily don't have to use. Some of our drip tape is in its 6th season because we just try to take good care of it. And then the other thing that we try to do is mulch a lot. And I wanted to show this picture so that everyone understands that our farm is not perfect. This picture was taken in, I think, 2016 or 2017. It's early in the season, which probably means June for us. And we're preparing beds and preparing to plant. And we have way too much bare soil exposed. And I must say that even though I read a lot about farming and I'm a hydrologist and I'm totally devoted to what I'm doing, back in about 2016, I didn't understand the real importance of not having bare soil. You can see I've mulched around the potatoes and I've mulched a bed of garlic and I've got some mulch here and there. But at this point in our operations, I sound like Bill Parker. I'm like, no bare soil. We don't want bare soil in our aisles. We certainly don't want it in our beds. It's just bad for the soil microbes. You lose worms, you lose soil health, and you lose a lot of water if you have bare soil. So the answer to what's missing in this picture is mulch. We're missing mulch. Yeah, it was too early to plant everything. That's early season. But we shouldn't leave our soil bare while we're waiting to get out there and get things seeded or transplanted. So, these practices of mulching and cover cropping and drip irrigation and moisture monitoring, that information is out there. The NRCS has an EQIP program of which we're a part of, and they will subsidize to a really small amount some of these practices, but more important than a small reimbursement or remuneration per acre, what's more important is just the information that they are putting out there. And some of these conferences about soil health and YouTube videos about soil health are really worth the investment in the time to learn how to do it right. And then, of course, as Bill mentioned, the Savory Institute and some of the work that Cold Harbor and Savory are doing to educate local farmers and ranchers. I think everyone should avail themselves to that information and those workshops. Because really, as we look into the future and this change in climate, we all kind of get to decide what practices we employ, try to make it profitable, and help decide what the future of agriculture is. Is the future of agriculture going to be large-scale agriculture? We're already seeing, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, some real breakdowns in our food system, breakdowns in transport. We have dairy farmers dumping milk because they're not set up to sell in the size of packaging that consumers are looking for now. So we have these two sides of our agricultural system. We have the wholesale side and the large institutional producers and institutional consumers like restaurants and colleges and prisons and things like that. And then we have the smaller scale consumer side. What direction are we heading? I actually think that COVID-19 has pointed out some of the fragility in our system, and that we're going to need to look for anti-fragile farming and anti-fragile lifestyles. So farms, more direct to consumer, more backyard gardening, although I must say that backyard gardeners don't always think about how to reduce water use. And so there's some education that needs to take place there. But everything we do, every choice we make, everything we put in our mouths has a choice and it has a consequence. And so your food choices matter as we look at what the future of agriculture looks like. And everything you or your farmer can do to build soil health is going to be critically important. We take that seriously on our farm. We look at anytime we have these wonderful ground beetles that are working for us to destroy army cutworm. We don't use any herbicides, pesticides on our farm. And in fact, we have little tiny frogs all over our farm. We find these little newts or the Colorado salamanders. And we just feel like we see these amphibians that are telling us that we have a wonderfully resilient ecosystem that we're building on our farm, and lots of snakes which eat insects for us. So whatever we can do to save water and build soil health, I think is going to benefit people because it just makes our crops healthier. So I think that's close to my 20 minutes, but I'll ask if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Sue. It does look like we had one question when you were talking about the buried drip tape. Sam Ebby asked, what's the water source, the river or the aquifer? If from the river, what is the need for serious conservationists? A small scale farm like, oh, excuse me, he said conservation on a small scale farm like this.
Sure. I mean, you could argue that I could use as much water as I want. We have a water right on the Aspinall storage unit that we purchased from the Upper Gunnison River Water Conservation District. And so, but on our 4-acre farm, we purchase a 1/4 acre foot, and we don't even use that amount. And we meter our flows. So we have a tailwater ditch that goes through our farm. So we're pumping from that surface water source to a gravity system and feeding it into our drip tape with filtration. And so you could argue that our water doesn't cost that much. We could double or quadruple or sextuple our water use and be able to afford, right now it's like $75 a year for our surface water source. And we could double or triple that. But what right do I have to use more water when it is a critical resource in the state? So sometimes the economics tell us what to do, and sometimes logic and heart tells us what to do. And I could afford more water, but I prefer to use these conservation practices because it feels like the right thing to do. I hope that answered the question.
I think it did. Thank you so much, Sue. We appreciate you making time to speak today.